In this next part of the program, we want to shift our attention to how we really create an educational system of continuous improvement and innovation. And we're really fortunate tonight to really have a national leader here who's going to guide us on that journey. I'm Keith Krueger, CEO of COSIN, the Consortium for School Networking, and we're a national nonprofit that represents the folks in charge of technology in school districts, chief technology officers. And our mission is really around systemically improving teaching and learning with new digital media. After listening to tonight's conversation and thinking to the opening by Chancellor Klein, I'm reminded of the quote by Eric Hoffer, who said, "In times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned inherit a world they're beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists." And I fear sometimes that that's the educational system we have. Just as Chancellor Klein talked about that beautiful porcelain plate, which he sees midair heading towards the crash, how do we make sure that in fact the system doesn't crash? And I think if there's a headline for tonight's program, it's that kids largely outside of formal education and really adults are tapping into a rich and powerful set of new media. We see them engaging in the power of pull, as John Seely Brown's new book is titled. It's increasingly driven by individual interests and passions, and yet formal education is struggling to really understand the potential of these new and largely collaborative and participatory tools for learning. Interestingly enough, just about a month ago, the 2001 Horizon K-12 report was put out that looks at emerging technologies for learning. And in fact, collaborative learning environments are one of the top 2 trends in K-12 at the primary and secondary level. If we had probably stated our hypothesis at that time, it would have been that most educational leaders were unfamiliar and probably pretty skeptical of the possibilities. To be very honest, we did a national survey and we were quite surprised to discover that over 75% of superintendents and district curriculum leaders agreed with the premise that Web 2 collaborative tools hold significant potential value for teaching and learning. In other words, the nation's educational leaders seem to be saying that they see the promise of Web 2.0 to energize learning and equip students with the skills that they need. So this is really good news. However, I'd have to say, and this is a big however, aside from rhetorical support for the concept, administrators are absolutely struggling with how to make effective use of digital media as a vital element of the learning environment. If we think of a continuum of stages, most of our educational leaders are at a very early stage, and they're stymied about how to leverage the power of digital media for learning. So we have a lot of work in front of us. Well, Karen brings a particularly fresh perspective. She comes to us from Washington. She is the Obama administration's lead spokesman on the role of technology in education. She's director of the Office of Educational Technology at the U.S. Department of Education, and she recently developed the new draft National Education Technology Plan. So it's with that background that I'm pleased to introduce my friend and colleague, Karen Cator.
Okay, so thank you so much for Keith for the great introduction, and to Pearson and MacArthur for hosting and making an event like this possible, for the fantastic panel. And I would just say, you know, as it goes, you know, you prepare these things ahead of time, and I would love to just kind of have an open conversation, but I will kind of run through a little bit of what we're talking about with learning powered by technology. It's interesting. I mean, the panel and many people today have sort of a little bit gone out of your way to say, you know, it's not about the technology. It really isn't about the technology, and that is absolutely right. And I would add to that sentiment by saying, and everything we're talking about is not possible without technology for the most part. Setting up social networks for students, tapping into their interests, giving them the opportunity to publish, to learn, to create games, to design, to do all of these things. It's absolutely powered by technology. So when we set out to create the National Education Technology Plan, we really made a concerted effort to put learning at the center. It's all about opportunity. And so when I think about this entire topic and everything everybody here is talking about tonight, it is all about opportunity. How do we make sure that every single child, every single young person, and actually every single adult, when they wake up in the morning, if they need to learn something new, they have that opportunity? Whether it be somebody around them, the technology, the formal school, the museum, whatever it is that they wake up in the morning and need to learn for whatever reason, we want to make sure that that opportunity is available to every single person, in this case, in the United States. So the National Education Technology Plan is really kind of based in that whole sense of that mission, learning powered by technology. So first of all, a little bit of the background context. We know mobility, technology is becoming more mobile, 24/7 access. There are social interactions for learning in a lot of other instances outside of necessarily the formal education. If you think about cooking or home improvement or photography or whatever it is. And there's digital content that's created that's highly produced and professional. There's content that's created by students that's also very highly produced and professional seeming, and lots of content that can be published. There's the master physics professor from MIT that people all over the world can listen to those lectures. So there's a proliferation of digital content. And finally, we are really looking at the education system and the focus on print, going from print to online. So if we think about kind of these four, and there are many other trends, but just kind of thinking about these four trends in the world right now in terms of technology, these are the kinds of things that also are driving how we're thinking about a 2010 National Technology Plan. And then finally, President Obama put this on the table and said by 2020, we want to have the highest per capita college graduates in the world. Not to mean that we're competing with the rest of the world, but really that we want to raise the bar and get way more of our young students over a higher bar. So to do that, we're right now at about 39%, and we need to get to about 60%. So I won't go into any of the numbers associated with this, but as you can imagine, we need to pull out all the stops and provide every possible opportunity for each and every student. So it is one student at a time, one program at a time, one system at a time. And really interesting, Chancellor Klein saying that they want to be the Silicon Valley for innovation and invention and learning environments. Fantastic, bring it on. We need to publish those so that the rest of the country can learn from those. So the tech plan was developed, I will just say, by lots and lots of people, very smart people, many opinions, lots of experience, people like hopefully all of you in this room, and a technical working group that really dug into the research and made sure that the plan was very grounded. It wasn't fluffy. It was very grounded in what we know about how people learn and what are the opportunities that we have today. And also it was grounded in the notion of open government. We wanted lots of input, lots of feedback. We published the draft plan online so that people could comment, not just on the whole plan, but on every single recommendation, et cetera. So let's just jump straight into the content. This is really about reimagining 21st century education. It's also then about what do teachers do? What is the role of teaching? And assessment. Lots of focus on assessment and how we think about that. And then after we really think about those three things, learning, teaching, and assessment, what is the infrastructure that needs to be put in place throughout the country to make that possible? And then how do we think about productivity? Again, if we're going to get way more students over a higher bar, how do we build cost-effective systems? And finally, there was a fun part of this was to say, so what needs to be invented? What are the grand challenges? What's the research and development agenda if we're going to make this happen? So the learning, I'm going to run through this quickly, really focused on 21st century expertise. What are the things that students need to know today? What are those skills? You saw lots and lots of 4 examples on the panel, on the screen behind them, the pictures, and pretty much in everything we've talked about today. Very much focused on how people learn. What is the science of cognition? What do we know about the necessity for prior knowledge and connecting to experience? What do we know about the role of engagement and motivation? These things are incredibly important for learning, and we know we can build systems, and we can power those systems by technology. Personalized learning, the opportunity for kind of that long tail of interest and personalization to drive a very personal learning environment for each and every student. And I will go out of my way to say personalized learning is very participatory. Doesn't mean headphones, plug yourself in, work by yourself. It means it's the opportunity to think with others, to really engage in that social act of learning. But it's very personal. It's very, very self-motivating and interesting to each and every person. And as you heard a lot about today, the notion of connecting formal and informal learning, and what kind of the notion of distributed learning. It is from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. How do we build that system and allow for continuous learning and different opportunities all day long? Universal design for learning, very, very much focused on the opportunity with technology now is beyond having to make special accommodations for those students with different disabilities to really creating systems where all children have the same environment, and it's just customized, it's tailored, it's personalized for that student. But the second section then was on assessment, and this is incredibly important. There's such a huge conversation about assessment right now, and what we really believe is that we can begin to measure what matters, and measure what matters equals 21st century expertise. We also think that it's possible to embed assessments throughout the learning experience so that we don't have to swoop in on April 23rd and, do something to all the students and, go off with the data, maybe ship it back later. So we really do think it's possible to embed assessments throughout the learning experience so that we know and the data stays closest to the students and the teachers and the people who need it immediately. And then the data can be anonymized and shared with those other people who need to make decisions about the system. Real-time feedback, the opportunity to let people know how they're doing each and every moment of the day. And the opportunity for students to maintain their own persistent learning record. And potentially, over time, a little blurring of the lines between what we traditionally think about as grade levels, right? So it's September 23rd, that means you're all fourth graders and you're in my classroom, that means we're all doing 2-digit multiplication today. Well, is it possible to create a different kind of system that more customizes and gives students what they need because they have their persistent learning record and the teachers and students and parents know where they are with respect to the skills that they need. And again, assessment with respect to universal design is also possible so that when we're assessing, we're actually assessing what we're trying to assess. And finally, all of our assessment data should be used for continuous improvement for the student, for the teacher, for the parent, and for the system. And finally, teaching. So teaching is really interesting. So absolutely, people should not get worried that teachers are not going to be necessary, they're going to go away. On the contrary, teachers become more and more effective and more important, and their work becomes more targeted at really helping each and every student. So a highly effective teacher is a teacher who's highly connected to the data, to the information, to the content and resources, so they can say, so what do we do next? How do we think about this problem? Connected to experts that could help them with whatever it is that's happening in their classroom, and connected to learning environments for themselves and learning experiences for themselves to help them become ever better. And what we're really seeing is there's a possibility that the traditional kind of materials that are in a classroom can be presented more in an online environment in a blended approach. So you have the teacher locally, but you may also have a teacher, quote unquote, in the cloud or elsewhere that's providing some context, maybe providing some of the content knowledge or whatever augments the teacher most fully. Again, the teacher in the classroom also highly connected to those other people in the student's learning environment. For example, folks in museums, folks in after-school programs, mentors, parents, other teachers that interact with that student. And finally, we want teachers to be inspired. How can we create the most empowered, professional workforce of teachers in the world? And to do this, we really do believe we need to create a very inspirational environment and one that's very empowering. And again, all of this requires a high degree of connectivity. So when we think about the infrastructure required to do all of this, right? So we focus on learning, we think about how the assessment supports the learning. The teachers are supported by the learning and the assessment environment. We need an infrastructure that is 24/7, community-wide, focuses on the home. The FCC broadband plan, we were very excited to see, really has a lot of recommendations for thinking about not only how will we connect the entire country into every rural area, but also how underserved populations are supported with broadband and the opportunities that are afforded once broadband is available. Access points everywhere. So again, the devices, I liked what Diana said in terms of what students have with them. So we can create environments that do leverage the technologies that students already have and augment those with ones we provide at a school, and ensuring that there is indeed equity. And finally, productivity. All of this said, what we need to do again is get way more students over a higher bar. So we're thinking about the fact that we don't have more financial resources, but we do have a basic wealth of time and money and staff. And so how do we make sure that we have the most cost-effective approach to utilizing all of these things so that every student every day, every teacher every day is in fact doing what they need to be doing at that time? We won't go into different financial systems, but thought about how our financial systems can be put to work to help us more than they do today. Also thinking about process redesigns. A lot of these things, we're really thinking about supporting the work that every individual parent, teacher, school is doing in reimagining the kinds of learning environments, and then also kind of taking a systems approach. What are the things that we need to do across the entire system? Seat time is a perfect example. We need to go from seat time to a competency-based model, and how do we bust down those barriers? And finally, where we are today, we published the National Technology Plan as a draft, and now we're taking all of the comments that we've received, and actually comments are still coming in even though we technically shut down the commenting on Friday, and we want to focus in on the action plan. So what I just laid out is kind of the broad vision in broad strokes. The plan is actually about 80 pages long that you can read. Somebody actually told me it was a page turner. I don't know. But but there's also a 12-page executive summary that you can read. But what we really want to do is focus in now and say, okay, how do we make this happen? How do we focus on the recommendations and make sure that the actions that are spelled out in this plan actually will get us where we need to go? So that's it. Learning powered by technology. We're really excited to take this forward, and it dovetails with the other work of the administration, with the Race to the Top, really thinking of more of the high-level system, with the Invest in Innovation grants that are very locally focused, the National Technology Plan that really thinks about how does technology support all of the work that we're trying to do, and then our whole blueprint around the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Act really kind of sits on top of all this as well. So we're working hard, hopefully for you all. Love to hear your ideas, and I thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. Thanks.